Hey everybody, Ultimate Oddball here. I wanted to make a video discussing some common misconceptions about autism, so I found some on a page on the PBS website. I thought I'd share the answers they provide and also share my personal view and experiences with each one. I'll jump right in. One common misconception is that all or most autistic people have savant-like abilities. The site says that only about 10% of autistic people display these abilities, but I've seen various numbers in different studies. Whatever the number is, it's relatively very low. I think it's important to remember that labels like savant are only really effective as conversational shorthand. As with functioning labels, they reduce complex human beings into something much simpler, ignoring and minimizing various traits and experiences. The page also mentions that splinter skills are common, which are skills that are above their overall performance abilities. Basically, this means that they're good at it. For me personally, the things that would fall into the category are mostly things that I've practiced extensively. Some of them I was naturally good at, but for the most part it was simply a matter of repetition and practice. Another common misconception according to the site is that every autistic person has mental disabilities. It's incredibly important to keep in mind the fluid nature of intelligence and the natural bias that tests which are developed for neurotypical people may present for autistic individuals. For years, nonverbal autistic people were considered to be lacking completely in intelligence. What we've seen since the invention of technology-assisted communication is that this is often far from the truth. The study of autism has thus far been largely rooted in the view that autism is a disease rather than a neurodivergence. This has resulted in the unfortunate focus on finding a cure for autism, which would of course mean that autistic people would never be born again. Many autistic people and allies for equality feel that the world would be fundamentally worse if this were the case. A huge misconception is that autistic people are naturally violent. This is categorically untrue. While there are certainly autistic people who have violent outbursts, in general autistic people are no more inclined towards violence than anyone else. As with all groups, there is a huge amount of variability among autistic people, but the numbers show that autistic people are more likely to face violence than perpetrate violence upon others. It's not uncommon to hear a story about parents murdering their autistic child. It's not uncommon to hear a story about a police officer murdering an autistic person because they didn't understand the officer or didn't respond in a way the officer expected or demanded. Occasionally we hear a story about an autistic person who murdered others, but it seems much more common to hear about the first two examples than the last. This idea that autistic people are inherently violent has the unintended effect of increasing violence towards autistic people from others who may feel threatened because of this stereotype. The final myth I'll go over is the idea that the increased prevalence of autism spectrum disorder diagnoses is the result of some unknown outside force, including vaccines, parenting style, etc. The increase comes down to two simple factors. People who previously would have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome were included in the autism spectrum disorder umbrella with the reorganization under the DSM-5. And people with intellectual disabilities were also folded into the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder who previously would not have been included. This is the source of what has been touted as an increase in prevalence, when in fact it is simply a matter of refining of diagnostic criteria. It's very important to keep in mind that the understanding of autism in many ways hasn't come that far and still has a long way to go. It wasn't that many years ago that autistic people in the US were kept institutionalized their whole lives. It wasn't that long ago that it was believed that a person who was nonverbal isn't conscious of the world around them. And hopefully it won't be long before we look back on how things are now and say to each other, it wasn't that long ago when autistic people were considered less. Well, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for coming by. Have a good day.
Hey everybody, Ultimate Oddball here. If you want to stay up to date with my videos, click subscribe. I release a new video on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do gaming commentary and review. I talk about my experiences on the autism spectrum, and I share my opinions and thoughts on a variety of matters. My hope is that, through my videos, I can help to dispel some of the misinformation, confusion, and negativity people have regarding autism. Thank you for helping me do that by watching these videos.